Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of my show. I'm your host, Jack Butler, and this is where we bring you conscious change agents and people who can add value to those of us aspiring to live a full spectrum life. I'm excited to have my guest today, Dr. Wallace J Nichols. He's a scientist, a movement maker, a New York Times best-selling author, a wild water advocate, and dad. He is a research associate at the California Academy of Sciences, and he's a co-founder of a number of organizations, including Ocean Revolution, an international network of young ocean advocates, See the Wild, a conservation travel network, and Live Blue, a global campaign to connect us to our water planet. Jay, great to have you on the show.
My pleasure. Really looking forward to this conversation.
Wonderful. Well, let's have people get to know you a little bit and how you come to be doing what you're doing. What have been the main inflection points or like life experiences or life decisions that have informed you devoting your life to this form of work?
I'd say it all began, like it does for a lot of people, as a kid, just falling in love with the feeling of being in nature, in particular the feeling of being around or in water. And like a lot of people, I dreamed of being a marine biologist and following up on that passion. And in my case, I did, and pushed through. And my drive really came from the desire to help solve problems rather than point at problems or spot problems or describe problems. I was mostly interested in solving them. And so I spent my educational years trying to accumulate tools that would be helpful as a problem solver. And then in my early career, worked on many projects that were really focused on science, but science in the service of solving problems related to the natural world, in particular the ocean and endangered species. So I see myself as a problem solver rather than a problem spotter, and that's a distinction that goes beyond my field, but just can be something that lots of people may relate to.
Yes, absolutely. I know that sometimes in the activism, whether it's environmentalism or social justice, there can sometimes be a tendency for people to sort of be angry at what's out there in the world and going on, and not necessarily marshalling their resources for something better. Mm-hmm. What's in this relationship between neuroscience and the sort of work that you do, and this field of neuroconservation that I know you're one of the kind of birthers of? Like, what is that about, and why do you feel that water has a role to play beyond just protecting the environment?
Well, I experienced it myself, that connection to water that really informed my entire career and my decision to pursue this line of work. And I've always wondered about what that pull actually is. What is it made of? Why is it there? What can we learn from it, and what can we do with what we learn? And I initially set out to find a book in the library about this, and I went to the libraries, I went to the digital libraries, and I didn't find it. I wanted to read this book called Blue Mind, and it wasn't available. And then I set out to try to get some colleagues to write it, because I thought were more prepared to do so, and nobody would take it. And so, sort of by default, I ended up writing it, and researching it, and pulling the pieces and the dots together, and telling the story, knowing very well that I'm not a neuroscientist. I have degrees in many other things, but neuroscience, one of them. And so I'm the messenger, I guess you could say, and perhaps a poor one at that. But my job is to kind of take this book and use it to knock the door open and invite other people, better equipped perhaps, to take this on to continue the conversation. And that's in fact what's happening right now. It's going well. It's really been interesting.
Fantastic. I love that sometimes in life it's just the call is there for someone, even if it's not particularly your, in your instance, you're saying, neuroscience wasn't my background, and that often if you're the person for whom it most occurs for something to have to happen in the world, that sometimes you're kind of hired by a life universe to do it.
Yeah.
Just a quick distinction around water. I'm filming here with the bay in the background, and in San Francisco Bay, and I know that you live on what is referred to as the slow coast in California. For a lot of people in America and other parts of the world that aren't living next to the ocean, are you talking about water generically, lakes, waterfalls, etc., or is there something specific about the ocean in terms of this brain connection?
Blue Mind is really a conversation about all water, from a glass of water to the Pacific Ocean and everything in between. And that may include your bathtub, your swimming pool, a trickle of a creek near where you live, a lake, a big river, a bay, San Francisco Bay or any others, a wetland, a pond, a waterfall, maybe there's a waterfall in the corner of the room that you're in, or even a sound app that makes water sounds,
right?
Which is what my daughter uses to help her go to sleep at night, even though we live near the water. So it is a conversation about all water. Turns out, standing by the vast Pacific Ocean is an extreme example of blue mind, of the blue mind feeling. But we can get it wherever we are. If you slip into a warm bath at the end of a tough day and just close your eyes and go under, that's what we're talking about. And that can occur in and around just about any kind of water. So it's a universal conversation, and it's a global conversation, and it's a conversation for all people in all places, from Kansas to the coast. And that's what makes it so exciting and interesting, I think.
So I'm imagining that most people hearing that will probably have some experience, hopefully more recent than not, of what you're talking about and the sort of effect that water can have on them. Without going sort of too deep into the neuroscience, what do we know about what is actually kind of going on that invites people into like a different connection with their body or into a different brainwave state? Like, what actually is going on?
Well, you're right. Most people have had some experience along these lines, and most people have a response to this conversation that's like, wow, yeah, that's so obvious and intuitive. You're obvious, aren't you? And so, yeah, it is obvious and intuitive. But let's go a little bit deeper. Mm-hmm. Let's ask the question of what's happening when we have those feelings. And so when you step away from the cubicle, when you put down your phone or step away from the screen, get out of your car, move away from traffic, leave the trappings of our modern society behind, yes, and go to the water, whichever water it is for you, the visual stimulation simplifies. The auditory input and information simplifies. So the view of water, the sound of water, creates a very simple, not a zero input, but a simplified, pattern-rich, rhythmic input. And that is very different than, say right now, you're listening to my voice. Your brain's doing a lot of work to interpret the pixels on the screen, the digital sound of my voice, and turn it into ideas and respond emotionally and intellectually to this conversation. When you step away from all of this and you're by the water, you give your brain kind of a vacation. It doesn't shut off, it doesn't go to sleep, but it moves into a different mode. And this mildly meditative, introspective, sometimes insightful, generally more creative mode that I refer to as blue mind. Some scientists refer to it as the default mode network, but it's a known state of mind that's different from our active state of mind. And so, if you think about your own life, when have you, if you've ever written a poem, when did you write that poem? Probably not under stress or during a deadline or when you were in red mind mode. Probably when you got a break. Maybe there was some sadness involved, maybe there was nature involved, but when you got a break from your red mind, after maybe an intense argument and you got a rest and a break and you were sad, maybe a poem just seemed to fall out of the sky. So it's that restful state, a more relaxed state. And that's not to say we need to live in that mode all of the time, unless, of course, we're poets.
Yes.
And in that case, that's useful. We need red mind and blue mind. We need both to deal with modern society. But if we only have red mind, our bodies suffer, and our creativity suffers, our productivity suffers, our health suffers, our relationships suffer, and none of that is good for living a fulfilling life. And so that's kind of really the gist of the blue mind idea. Now we can go down into the details of all the different facets of it and go deeper and deeper as I do in the book. But that's of it.
Yeah, I like that. And a decent proportion of my viewership are people that engage in meditation or some form of spiritual inquiry. I just wondered, do you have any sense of sort of the relative ability of being with water versus perhaps just meditating in your front room to take you into the sort of state that you're talking about?
Well, water is a great guide, and if you're learning to meditate, maybe a little bit nervous about the whole idea, just relaxing by water is a good place to start. The idea of, some people are a bit foreign to the idea of meditation, and it seems sort of outside of their comfort zone. It sounds strange, but
yes.
As comfortable as it is, it seems to be something they just don't do. So as a sort of training wheels for meditation, I suggest just go sit by water and really listen to it. Whether it's a fountain, whether it's a creek, whether it's a little, an indoor water feature. It could be an urban waterfall or an urban fountain, or it could be something much more wild and large. Just go spend some time and listen to it and watch it closely and let your mind completely go into that sound and into that image. And people achieve a mildly meditative state from that experience. And it's a start down that path. Now, if you look around at any website or magazine or conference related to yoga or meditation, many of the times, if not most of the times, they will use water imagery to depict what they're doing over and over and over. Just people doing yoga with their eyes closed by water is kind of the ultimate way to do it.
That makes sense. So let's draw the lens out a little bit.
For a reason, and there's a reason there. Go ahead.
I would say let's just draw the lens a little bit out from the sort of like the individual to the expanse of the oceans. Just at the headline view, I'm imagining that there's a whole bunch of people who have a relatively environmentally friendly, climate change aware worldview who like the idea of ocean conservation, but perhaps haven't been directly involved in that in their life. So I'm wondering, what's the sort of headline current state of the nation of the oceans, and what are the most pressing problems that you see in the realm of ocean conservation or species survival? Like, what is the real pressing edge of that?
Well, there's a lot of bad news, and as a marine scientist who pays attention to it and has a Google alert on ocean bad news, I'm hit with it every morning in a big way. And what I help make sense of that news by framing it this way: that we are putting too much into the ocean of what shouldn't be there. We're taking too much out of the ocean of what should still be in the ocean, and we're wrecking the edgy places where the majority of life and biodiversity occurs. So those are the three big categories of our ocean impact.
Yeah.
And for me, that helps me just sort out and handle the red mind bad news that's coming at me, probably more than most people have it coming at them, because I pay more attention to it. And so you can unpack each of those categories. So, putting too much in is in the form of oil spills, heat from climate change, CO2, which is causing acidification, and plastic pollution, and a range of other chemicals. But we're putting too much of all of that into the ocean, and the ocean just can't handle it at the scale that we're doing it anymore. It used to be able to, when we were fewer and our technologies were not as developed and our use of fossil fuels wasn't as expansive. But now the ocean is getting hit harder than ever before. Taking too much out, well, that's overfishing, overhunting of animals that can't replenish their populations quickly enough. And we see a decline in many fish stocks and large, slow-growing species. And then the edgy part, protect the edge. We're destroying the edge. So that requires us to create marine protected areas in those vulnerable, productive, biodiverse places like wetlands, kelp forests, coral reefs, places where currents collide. Any place that you could describe as edgy is important biologically and ecologically, and requires some protection. So marine protected areas are a way to handle that. So that's kind of a ocean crisis 101, if you will. Overriding issues, of course, climate change and ocean acidification that affect everything across the board, all aspects of life on Earth. And so, but that's not to downplay the more specific, acute threats like plastic pollution and overfishing.
So if you were able to write one law to change something about what currently goes on in the sort of biodiverse environments you're talking about, and let's just assume for a moment that there was some sort of 100% perfect execution of that law, what one would you write?
I would say I'd go kind of high level, a bit meta, and I would say that each of us has the right to replace ourselves reproductively, or not, and that's the rule. And we would enforce that in the kindest, most gentle possible way. I don't even know what that would be, but the law would state, the law of the land, the law of the world would be that each of us can replace ourselves simply, or not.
And you're talking about all species.
For humans, yes, each of us can simply reproduce the point that we replace ourselves with another human being, a child, our offspring. So if you partner up, you and your partner can have 2 kids, and or none, or 1, but that's your choice. And I think in one generation, our population growth would slow and cease, and in a couple of generations we would see things moving in a more sustainable direction. And some people argue, oh, we can continue to grow as long as we all just make our footprint smaller. Well, yes and no. I think you're seeing the results of our current trajectory right now. There's a lot of space on the planet, but our use of resources and our impact is certainly massive. And it's the conversation about human population is not always a popular one or a comfortable one for some pretty gnarly historical reasons. But I think it can be a conversation that we can have without being nasty and mean and destroying cultures and being forceful at it. So that would be my suggestion, if not a law, would be that we talk about just, yeah, you can replace yourself. That's your right, but more than that is not recommended. And that would get at a lot of these concerns. We would eat less fish. We would consume less oil and coal if we could start to slowly head down the slope rather than up the slope of population.
Yes. I'm not in the fullness of the data on that. My understanding is that the biggest expected population growth over the next 50 years is mostly in the developing world. There are a bunch of countries, and I'm thinking to Europe, where the population rates have been mostly stagnant over the last decade or so. So for those countries, let's say the UK, for example, because I think America's population actually continues to grow. What's the sort of number one highest leverage action? Let's say the people are already in the sort of one child per person kind of policy that you're talking about. What's the highest leverage action that an individual can take who cares about the oceans but maybe doesn't necessarily live next to one?
This is the way I've been answering that question the past few years is I kick it right back to people and I say, what do you think? What do you think is the one thing you can do for the ocean? And the people living in the places you just described, they know. They know the answer to that question. They know the best answer for themselves. They know the one thing that they're not doing that they could do. And so my answer is, you know the answer. You do. You do. You know the answer. You know the thing that you should do, that you're not doing, that you can do, that would have a big impact. And you'd be however many answers to that question as there are viewers.
Yes. So in a sense, you're inviting
listeners. That's great. Yeah, I could say don't eat shrimp, don't use plastic, and you will roll your eyes and ignore me and say, yeah, I've heard that, and then tomorrow night you're going to have shrimp. So that's not the way I roll anymore. I ask the question back and I listen, and every time I listen, I hear brilliant answers, and I believe those answers are more likely to be followed through on than anything I might come up with right now. So that's my non-answer answer, I guess you could say.
I like that. It reminds me a bit of people being in conversations about theories of change and what are the best lever points to create positive change in the world. And I think it's a Howard Thurman quote that basically says the world is changed by people who come alive. And so the basic encouragement is to do the things that you are drawn to, and that each of us sort of in our own self-guidance system, however we understand that, has certain things that resonate with us or that we just have energy for, and if we apply ourselves in that direction, that typically that might bring our highest kind of good into the world.
Yeah, and in that light, I'll follow up on that. The suggestion, not so much what should I do for the planet, but my one suggestion is to go to your water, whatever your water is, and get in it and get under it. And it's been a long time. For a lot of people, it's been a very long time since they've been completely submerged beneath wild water. And it's exquisite. It's a human, beautiful, completely immersive, exquisite experience that is your right to enjoy wherever you are. If you have to hop a gate and trespass, do it. Just get to the water and get in it. If you get arrested, sorry about that, but get in it, get under it, and hold your breath, look around, You may need to shower off when you get out, depending on the quality of your waterway, but do it, because the disconnect, the growing disconnect between us and our waters is one of the reasons why these. So that would be my my advice if I were offering it.
I like it. I want to talk a little bit about kind of how you do life. You've obviously got a prominent personal brand, and you've done a lot in the media, and you have your book, and you've convened conferences, you've co-founded a lot of organizations. I guess my question is, what advice would you give people that perhaps they have a cause in the world? It doesn't necessarily have to be oceans or even environment, but a thing that they feel really sort of compelled to do that perhaps doesn't have the most obvious linear career path, or that the way of doing that linear career path doesn't really appeal to the sort of adventurer and entrepreneur in them. What advice would you give to people who are sort of contemplating really forging a self-authoring path, and how to make that life work and how to make it sustainable?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the sustainable part. I'm figuring that out as I go, and I guess that's part of the the challenge that you need to be ready to take on board, is that the unknown. And if you're okay with the unknown, although everybody is dealing with the unknown, but if you're doing the kind of an independent approach and you're trying to break some ice, as the case may be, there's more unknown to that. So if that's digestible and you're okay with that lifestyle, less security, I suppose you could say. I got, when I was a grad student, I did an interview. I helped a reporter at the Wall Street Journal who covered the environment with some things he was working on. And he used a phrase that has stuck with me, and he said, "I like working with you because you're an honest broker." And I hadn't heard that phrase before, and at first didn't know what he meant, and then I thought about it and decided I like being someone that would be referred to as an honest broker by a reporter at the Wall Street Journal or anywhere else. And so that label I stuck to myself. I said, I like that. I'm going to keep that one. I put it right here, and that's part of it. If you're going, if you're going to build a personal brand, as some people would refer to it, be an honest broker. Be honest to yourself about what you're doing and why you're doing it, but then communicate to the best of your ability what you know to be true, and try to have the best information about your thing, whatever your thing is. Have an impeccable information that may even be quite unique in your niche, and be honest about it and be clear, and then you will reap the benefits of that as they may come. The way that I've set up my work, and this goes all the way back to grad school, is three parts. One is build a network. It's the relationships. One is generate knowledge, and one is communication, sharing. So network, knowledge, and communication. Otherwise, known as relationships, yes, understanding, and sharing. So build good relationships, cultivate them. Build your understanding of the thing you do uniquely, and give it all away, wildly but strategically and smartly. But give it away. And if you keep doing those three things well, they feed off of each other. And having impeccable understanding of something will help you build your network. Helping build your network will help you give it away. And you see these three sort of, but you can imagine the Venn diagram in your head right now. Yes. These three overlapping circles with that sweet spot right in the middle. And I've taken that model with me ever since grad school, and just I put it from time to time on a piece of paper and jot down the things I'm doing that fit into those three categories. When I'm consulting with grad students or nonprofits or corporations, I do the same thing. I'll put those three circles down and say, okay, what are you doing in those three realms? Is there one that's weak? Is there one that's over full?
Yes.
And so that's a simple, very simple model, if you will, that's portable and useful on all projects, small projects or big campaigns or new organizations. And everybody does things in each of those categories, but they may not describe it that way. And it can be really helpful to kind of go through those filters and do that. So
yes.
I guess that's a little piece of maybe portable practical advice.
I like that. Now you said something in there. You said give it away wildly and strategically. Could you just say a little bit as to what you mean by that?
Yeah, we live in a time where if you don't give it away, somebody's just going to take it. So you may as well take a stance of a sharing stance, but also do it with some intention. So there will be some serendipity, some just broadcasting. So this conversation right now, we will broadcast this to the far corners of the digital universe, and it will surprisingly reach people that we never imagined this conversation that you and I are having right now would reach, and it will surprise them. Yes. And that's serendipity. And there are some people I will invite specifically to listen to this conversation we're having right now for very clear reasons. And both of those things are true. So there's the strategy. There's a group of people I say, hey, you ought to listen to what we just talked about for this reason and that reason. And then there's a group of people who are complete strangers who will stumble upon these words that we're speaking to each other right now.
Yes.
And so you want to be strategically smart and also available to capture the serendipity and put it into your flow, towards your agenda. And so both of those things are true. So there's the wildness of it, and I guess there's the not so wildness of it.
Yes, I like that. I mean, I spend a lot of time talking with people about the both and world or both and thinking, and a little bit different, but to some extent what you're saying there is it's something like what we would call the directing and allowing polarity, both being strategic and directing, in this instance, this interview, say, to particular people, and then also allowing and surrendering and seeing serendipitously what wants to come through it. I did want to ask you, I know that you have been a co-founder of a number of organizations. I listed just 3 in your bio, but there's many more. How has that been for you, and how operationally involved do you get in those organizations or campaigns? Because I know that for a lot of us that are entrepreneurial and have that sort of catalytic visionary energy, sometimes the tendency can be to scatter the attention too thinly, or conversely to sort of direct it too tightly that actually you end up losing some of your life inspiration and kind of bringing the new energy in, which is invigorating. So how do you sort of strike that balance, and is there anything about how you actually approach those organizations that we could learn from?
Yeah, so there are a few organizations that I've been involved with and involved in setting up that the involvement lasted a decade or more of real hard work in the trenches day to day.
Yes.
And then there are others that I'm a board member. I may be a co-founder, but it's a little more of an advisory role. And so each is a different story.
Yep.
But my state of mind about this is that I'm not that interested in an organization per se. I'm interested in a movement. I'm not so interested in campaigns. I'm interested in the broader. It's a different orientation. And so early on, I realized that I'm not so good at working for people, with people. And that insight and using those words in my head, and there's like a light bulb went off. And then I thought, okay, how would I design a career that made the most of that reality about the way I work best, rather than fighting against it over and over as has happened and does happen to people.
Yes.
And so I took a step back and I said, okay, well, I can work with many organizations or governments or companies or grad students or entrepreneurs and help and be of use, but not work for them. And that's a very different approach to your time, to your time allocation. And so I have a set of questions that I ask and get answers to and share going into any new collaboration or relationship, whether it's a new grad student or an invitation to be on a board or an advisory board. And so that filters out some potential collaborations, and we decide it's not for us, or it brings more on board. So, not to get down in the details of those, but having that filter, your own personal filter to decide what comes in and what doesn't is useful. And then, everything I've ever started, I've started with the goal of putting myself out of a job. And so slowly or quickly, as the case may be, just getting away from that position. Whether it's sea turtle conservation or Blue Mind, my goal is to have other people kind of come in and take it over, and then have my role not be needed and move on to some other things. And I've been successful at putting myself serially out of jobs, and I count those losses of jobs as my greatest successes. So.
Love that. I know there's a lot of like entrepreneurial types that will be able to relate to that. Sounds like serial obsolescence.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to call that.
Exactly.
So I wanted to give you a chance to talk to anything that you're currently working on or passionate about, you want to let people know about, and also any ways that you want people to connect with you.
Well, I would say the Blue Mind conversation connects to many, many fields and sectors and industries outside of ocean and wild water conservation. To name a few, health and well-being, education and parenting, arts and design, real estate and planning, travel and leisure, sports and recreation. And there are more, but those are the handful that I tend to direct the attention to. I think there's applications of the neuroscience of brain on water to all of those sectors, and I'd certainly invite anybody who's interested in following up in any way to pick up the book or read an excerpt or go to the library and check it out, listen to the audiobook and see where there may be an intersection, and let's talk about that. The other thing that I want to be sure to mention is this little guy right here, which is just the blue marble, and has come to be the simple, iconic representation of this conversation that we're having, the conversation about collaboration, the conversation about our fragile planet that needs all of us to pull towards fixing what's broken, the conversation about sharing. And so if you find yourself with a blue marble given to you, your job is to pass it on to somebody and thank them for their good work and to share your blue marble forward. And there are a million of them being passed around the world. Wow. From person to person, and there's no way to turn it off. There's no budget, there's no funding, there's no organization to speak of. You can get marbles wherever you find a blue marble supplier, or you can come to us and we'll help you with that. But the idea is to share a blue marble with someone that you just want to kind of surprise and say thanks. Maybe because you never have, maybe because it's overdue, maybe there's some gratitude that needs to happen weighing on your mind that you want to do something a little bit more than just say, hey, thank you, or a thank you card. And so these marbles have found their ways all over the planet, from the North Pole to the South Pole, on all continents. People of all ages. The Dalai Lama got one, and the Pope got one. Jane Goodall got one, and James Cameron got one. And they get passed on and on and on. And it's a reminder that everything we do matters, and we live on this little blue planet that's mostly water, and that working together and collaborating, even in the simplest ways, is helpful and important. And so this has become kind of the icon of the blue movement, if you will, and the movement for water, but also the movement for more collaboration, more love, more sharing. And now I'm sounding like I'm from California, but
I'm with you.
Yeah.
And I'm curious about that. Did you kind of release a million marbles into the world, or did you kind of start with a certain number and then encourage people to go and find their own?
Well, I started out with one, and I gave it to a friend of mine named LeBaron and said, what do you think? How does this make you feel? This is a little thank you. And she said, wow, that's so cool. And she works in the app world. And she said, that's a killer app. And then I named it socio-physical media rather than social media, but the physical part. So it's socio-physical media. You can't give somebody a digital blue marble. You need to give them a solid one. And then I gave a lecture at the New England Aquarium and decided, in their big IMAX theater, and decided to give one to everybody as they came in the door. And by the end of the lecture, I figured out what my message was going to be. And it turns out that there was a spinning sphere on the screen as my last slide, which is the NASA images from space of our planet. And it just worked. And I got better feedback from that presentation than ever before, because it was couched in attitude and in a simple action of taking the marble, passing it forward. And the stories started to flow in. I said, okay, this works. So I bought the bluemarbles.org URL and just put up a little note and said, if you get one, pass it on. Here's what it represents. You can find your own blue marbles wherever you may like to source them. And then, there's a Marble King based in West Virginia, is the last remaining U.S. manufacturer of blue marbles, so we like to support them. They're made of recycled glass, by the way. And it just has taken off.
Right on.
It's just sort of gone viral. It's people get a blue marble and they say, I want 20 to give to my class, or I want 100 to give to my next event. And it just kind of keeps going like that.
Very neat. Well, here's to bringing more compassion, water, environmental awareness, wild and strategic action into the world. It's been great being with you. Thanks for coming on the show. And here's wishing you well with all the endeavors you're involved in and the ways that you're trying to up-level this way that we're being in this world together.
Right. Thank you for a great conversation, and I'll wish you water right back at you.
I love that. I wish you water. There you go. Very good. You take care for now.
You take care too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.